To kick off our discussion, let's take a look at someone that was recently fired for a column that she wrote. And of course, we're talking about Cooley Roberts in the Sunday World column, where she was taken to task for being a racist. And she actually just said she was making a joke. Kieno, did you find this article offensive?
No, I didn't find it offensive. I found it silly and I found it quite stupid the way she wrote it, to be very honest with you. She took a whole lot of stereotypes and then sandwiched it with very little to nothing. If there were a principle behind it, if she treated it a lot better and more cleverly, I think she could have gotten away with it. And it just looks like she woke up in the morning and decided, who am I going to peeve off today? Let's write a couple of stereotypes about
I don't even think she wanted to peeve off anybody. She just wasn't thinking that this might cause offense. And then, of course, it did.
But it's the nature of a column, though. I mean, she wakes up and she needs to upset people. And
but she's also that personality.
Yeah.
I mean, can you actually take her seriously?
But,
some people are saying, it's Cooley Roberts.
Yeah. A lot of people called her racist. One thing I want to say is I've met Cooley before. And I know her reasonably well. Cooley is not a racist. No. I think Cooley tries to evoke reaction. And she does it through, and she's written worse, let me tell you. She's upset more people. And I think this is
not the first time.
This is definitely not the first time. She's also, I mean, think about it. Jimmy Manyi.
Yeah.
All right. The legislation.
With the Trevor Manuel story.
Right.
What's going on with coloured people these days?
I think that's why it got a rise.
Yeah,
that's why it got a rise, because it's a subject that's currently under discussion. And obviously, if you step on any group's toes, they're going to try and offend the Christians, and they'll be on your case just as fast, you know.
So are these topics taboo?
No.
Politics,
no, they're
religion,
not. No,
race.
But you have to tread carefully. You have to be careful. Miss Roberts, I read that thing and I thought maybe it's satire, and I read it again and no, it wasn't. And
did you find it funny though?
No, I didn't.
Okay,
no, I think some things are not funny. We love to call each other racists in this country. I agree with Kiemo. We can't call her a racist. She's a nice woman. Yeah. But she didn't think before she wrote that.
Well, let's hear from Heat magazine editor. You've just recently actually spoke to her, got an exclusive interview with Cooley Roberts. What did she say?
She said that she didn't mean to offend anybody. So again, I'm not here to defend Cooley.
Sure.
But I think what I want to defend is, you know, the right to free expression. And the minute you start saying, you know, the right to free expression, except for this and except for this and except for this,
then where is that right?
It's not free expression anymore.
Yeah.
So I think the Daily Maverick actually wrote something that I thought was really great. They were saying that, and in fact they were quoting Fariel Haffajee, who had said, racism, if you want to call it racism, it gives the opportunity for anti-racism. So let's not all try to reconcile around this. So we find those statements racist, not necessarily the person who wrote them. So it gives us an opportunity to anti that, so to discuss it and say, well, it's not cool to talk like that.
Right.
But as a columnist, you know, really, a columnist is supposed to be controversial. They're supposed to stick their necks out. They're supposed to say stuff that the rest of us might just think. You know.
But then where's the line, Kiemo? Because you know, she's saying I'm joking. Yeah. Are there then topics that we can't joke about?
Well, you know what? I don't think by virtue of the fact that you upset someone, you shouldn't be writing something.
No. Right.
I think we are judged. We judge what we should and should not do via the Constitution.
Yeah.
Everybody's got the right to dignity, right? You can't incite violence. But the higher you go as well, the more exposed you are. Like the president, for example.
Right.
We have Archbishop Tutu saying stuff about the president. And I did a show once and I said, well, you know what? The president, if you were a car, would you buy him based on perception? Would you? Would you buy him based on reputation? And a lot of people phoned in saying, well, no, he's a Datsun, you wouldn't want to drive him. Who wants to buy a 5-seater, that's a 1955-seater? And people start using jest and they start making comments, but he's the president. Can the president come and say, well, my dignity's been infringed? It's going to be harder for him to do it than ordinary Joe Bloggs in the street because he is the president.
But you're going to get to a point where we can make fun of ourselves. I think we're a society that can poke fun at any race, you know. Are we just being too sensitive, do you think?
No, I don't think we're too sensitive. It's easy to say we can poke fun at races, but I don't think we're there yet.
We're not there yet.
Maybe one day, I hope so soon, but I don't think we're there yet.
I don't know in any country in the world where you can poke fun at racism. Racism isn't funny. But the thing is, people are allowed to talk about it. People are allowed to have opinions.
Right.
You know, columnists have to have the right to say something. And then the rest of us have the right to then say, absolute nonsense, rubbish, how dare you, I take offense. I mean,
but
it opens a conversation.
Sorry, Melinda. I think you have to draw a line between racism and stereotypes.
Yeah.
Racism is when you think someone is inferior to you based on the color of their skin. That is racism. And we need to all we shouldn't use racism the way Gwedi Mantashe and everybody else uses racism. It's just the new word that they've picked up and they just throw it around, he's being a racist. There's nothing wrong with stereotypes as long as you do it correctly.
You were saying earlier about stand-up comics who do it. So if you can phrase the thing correctly, you can get away with more. If you
get away with it.
Be clever and twist it and turn it so no one can actually put their finger on what it is that you said, but you evoked a feeling, then you can get away with it.
But then who at the end of the day needs to get the rap? Because if you look at Cooley Roberts, she was fired. Dion Maas was fired. David Bullard was fired. Where's the editor in all of this, Dirk?
I'd love to know what her brief was. I presume she was told be controversial.
The thing is called Bitches Brew.
Yes.
Obviously.
How can you take that seriously?
It's not called, you know, serious look at South African society.
You can't hire someone to be controversial and then fire if she does just that. The editor must read that stuff. There's more, there's sub-editors. They must go to the editor and say, listen, sir, we can't run this story.
Because in print, you go through censorship. You go through, you know, subs and...
But different stages where quality control happens.
Quality control, yeah.
So should the onus then be on the editor at the end of the day, Kieno?
I don't see why a columnist needs to get fired when a deputy editor looked at it and said, it's fine.
Yeah.
Because she gets a brief. She tries, or he tries within his best to stick to that particular brief. And of course, if your column's called Bitches Brew, you're not going to be nice to everybody.
You're not supposed to be.
That's what you're supposed to do. But who draws the line? The editor should be saying, that's okay. And if the editor say that's okay, how can you then justify firing someone and there aren't any other repercussions when it comes to that chain?
Because what happens to the editor at the end of the day?
Well, I'm an editor and I would say I would have to take the responsibility for something.
You take the rap.
You have to take the responsibility. Okay, maybe nobody gets fired. Every case needs to be looked at differently. But there certainly should have been maybe more made of the fact of that the editor accepted that this piece went in. And take the responsibility. It's disloyal to suddenly distance yourself from somebody that you employ. Now I'm saying a terrible thing. Am I saying this on the record? But I think it caused offence. The fact that it caused offence needs to be addressed. And I don't think necessarily firing somebody solves that, because now you're getting a different person in. You're also asking them to be controversial. They are probably going to self-censor now because they saw what happened to the previous guy.
Right.
And, you know, freedom of expression suffers.
Where does that come? But now, what was a good example for me is that one of your senior journalists, Yolanda Barnard, I mean, she's quite outspoken in her articles. You've never fired her. You know, you always seem to always back her up. You know, is it quite difficult sometimes?
No, it's not. Yolanda is a pro. She's an old pro. She's one of the real tabloid warriors of our time. When she writes something, she knows what's happening. She's got a little bit of information at the back as well.
A little bit of information.
Quite a bit. We can't make the important voices of our time. We can't make them defenseless by censoring them all the time. It's impossible. We shouldn't do that. It's not allowed.
One quick question to Melinda is, do you not feel sometimes editors are put in a catch-22 situation? You know, on the one side, you can't fire a journalist because you want them to be controversial if you're an editor that actually stands for freedom of speech.
It depends on what your brief is to the person, depends on what their job is. Obviously, columns also isn't journalism. You must remember, it's a column.
It's a column.
It's an opinion piece, and it's a controversial opinion piece generally. All those people that we've mentioned who've been fired have been known to be controversial, so clearly that is their brief. It's not journalism where you have to go and research something, get your facts right, speak to the right people, not omit certain things to color it to your liking. And you apply different criteria to that. But I think if you're an editor and somebody's working for you and they stick to their brief, it's your responsibility to make sure that what goes into print It's not just the editor, as you were saying earlier. There's a whole range of people who go through it who all understand what the brief is, what our publication stands for, and what we want to get out of there. And as an editor, it's also your job to make sure that each one of those people along the line understands that and is able to make the right decision in the editor's absence. You know?
But like, you know, radio is different. I mean, you don't have this chain of command that Melinda was just talking about. Do you censor yourself?
No, listen. They don't put me on during the day very often. And then my boss will always tell me, remember, you're not on at night. But what they do is they allow us, they give us license.
Okay.
If I am worried about something, or if I'm concerned, I understand my media law pretty well, but if I'm concerned about something, I'll phone my boss. And I'll say, listen, I want to talk about this, but I'm not quite sure. Now, she's a lawyer. And she's a very, very good bouncing sort of board on that. And we've got the BCCSA, and people have access to the BCCSA. I've been taken there a couple of times. Luckily, we've won all of them. But it's a very fine line that we do walk on radio. I don't have a programming manager sitting over my shoulder going, what are you talking about today? What's your angle? I make that decision at the end of the day. I sit with the producer, and we go ahead and we do it. But people also know when they tune into my show, that I'm going to say it the way I see it. I'm also not going to incite people to violence. I talk about religion. As a good Catholic myself, I've taken on the Pope when it comes to his silly condom issue about you can't come to sub-Saharan Africa and tell people to wear condoms. It's stupid. And I said it. But there's a principle behind it. So we make sure that whatever we talk about, it's got a principle behind it. And even if we had to go to BCCSA, has to have context, and you should be able to defend it.
Because you have been in hot water before.
I was sued by Mara Lowe at one stage.
I was just going to say that. What happened there?
She didn't get very far.
You called her a few names.
Well, what I did was, it was a tool that I used, and granted, you know what, it was my first 40 minutes on music radio breakfast. And I'd just come from a talk radio background. And I heard them making a comment about a 17-year-old saying the only way you're going to get to the top is to sleep your way to the top. And I then went through all the judges, Randall Abrams and the rest of them, and I got to Mara Lowe, and I said, talk about sleeping your way to the top. And I said, you know, would you sleep with Mara? And I spoke to my team about it. But she's high up there, she's in the public eye. And we basically gave back the same medicine that they dished out.
Right.
And that was my defense. I said, how would they deal with this? And of course, she didn't like it very much. And I was served with a letter demanding $1 million or whatever, which I don't have and never will have. But yeah, luckily I was working for Kagiso back then, and their lawyers dealt with it, and they've reached some amicable agreement. I'm not quite sure what it was, but yeah, it was sorted out.
You need to stand out from everybody else, don't you?
But you mustn't be stupid about it.
And it sells. Controversy sells.